had a friend or a colleague that just got you totally and completely from the moment that you met? And not only that, but then you found you had so many things to learn from them and them from you. And so it just kept getting better and better and better. Well, while they are few and far between, one of those people for me is Danielle Pickens. She is a time whisperer extraordinaire. And after today's episode, I'm sure you're going to love her too. Welcome to the Do More, Stress Less podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Hasselberger, a time management and productivity coach. In every episode, I give you actionable, practical tips to help you learn to use your time in a way that feels good to you every day. No more hustling, scrambling, or struggling to keep your head above water. So let's dive in, and soon enough, you'll be doing more and stressing less. Danielle is the CEO of LumiTalent, a leadership development firm that works with mission-driven organizations to sustain leaders for social change work. She is also the fractional CEO of the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, which is a national education nonprofit focusing on strengthening K-12 talent systems so that more students have consistent access to really great teaching. In both roles, Danielle focuses on how organizations attract, develop, and retain their leaders through leadership development programming, executive coaching, and thoughtful organizational redesign. Her work has directly impacted more than 8,000 leaders across education and other mission-driven organizations, and I couldn't be any happier to have her on the podcast today. Hi, Danielle. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited for you to be here.
I'm really excited to be here too, Alexis.
Awesome. Well, I would love for you to just give the listeners a little bit of a snapshot about who you are and what are all the things that you're juggling, you're balancing, that are teetering over on your plate.
Awesome. So the most important thing to know about me is I'm a mom of three. I have three kids, 17, 12, and 9, who have pretty demanding travel sports. So there's always a lot that we are juggling with that. My oldest is also applying to college. So that brings with it a whole new host of activities and actions I was not really prepared for. The other things to know about me are I have been a business owner for the last 14 years, and I do a lot of leadership development work, particularly with folks who are in the mission-driven space, so education, nonprofits, and I've just taken on a new role as a fractional CEO for a client I've worked with for the last 14 years. So I'm really feeling very in flux, like I am entering a new season. I still have other clients that I work with, so between my family responsibilities that are starting to shift and this new role, it feels like there's a lot going on. And while I had really good systems in the past, I need to start to evolve the current systems because you and I talked about this at one point. I feel like my current systems are starting to break down. They are not working for the season that I'm in.
Yeah, well, I so appreciate you saying that and getting started there because that is what this podcast is all about. It's about how we get things done and how sometimes we don't and how our systems evolve. And I think this is all the things, right? CEO, travel sports. I have only been a travel sports mom for 2 years. Somehow I lucked out of that until my oldest decided that he was going to do travel volleyball, having never played volleyball before, and somehow is actually good at it. And so I can't even imagine having done this for years and years and years like you have. And you're 1 year ahead of me on the college process. So I'm going to have to learn a lot from you. But I feel like this is really normal that when our circumstances change, that our systems have to change. And it's hard to do that proactively sometimes, right? It's I always think about the pandemic, right? And it's oh, we figured out systems, but 6 to 12 months too late, right?
Yes. Yes. I have really been fighting this new season, right? I coach people around this as well. And I'm always we have to plan for the reality that you're living in. And I'll be honest, I liked my systems. They were working. And so to feel like I've outgrown them now and have to rethink something that was working fairly well for me is very frustrating as someone who enjoys efficiency and feels like I don't want to have to redo things. It just feels like another cognitive lift. So, I mean, one of the big things that I'm really juggling this season is I'm spending a lot more time in my car. So the time that I used to be able to do things around the house is not there anymore. We used to have someone who supported us in our house, but now that my kids are older, we don't need her anymore. So it just feels like I have to rethink everything. And at a time that is feeling already really stressful, college applications, juggling all of the sports, a new role to onboard into, adding on, oh, I need to rethink my systems feels like something I just don't want to do. I want to curl under the covers with a good book and just forget about it all for a little bit.
I understand that. Yeah, because it feels really, well, it feels like annoying, right? Like just at a base level, right? You're like, I
Yeah.
figured this out. Like, I figured this out. Why do I have to figure out again? And I always think of it, it's kind of like parenting in general, right? Where it's like
Yes.
every time you have something, quote, figured out, it's like, okay, then it all changes, right? And it can
Yes.
be everything as
Yes.
simple as like, oh, my kid loves bananas. So every week I buy a bunch of bananas. And like now my kid hates bananas. And like I have all these rotting bananas on the couch. Like it can be as simple as
Yes.
that. Or it can be like, yeah, they've moved into a new season. And it's like, this is our lives too, right? It's like we maybe change slower than our kids do, but
Yes.
things change.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is a big challenge as an adult is you get really comfortable. And I love being comfortable. So the thing that I have to tell myself in this moment is, okay, this is clearly not working. Now my, various systems are breaking down. I'm either missing appointments or I'm forgetting to do something. And I don't like to feel that way either. So which is worse, right? Like being uncomfortable or, just biting the bullet and figuring out what might a new system be. And when people think about a new system, they think it has to be this major overhaul. And so what I am trying to remind myself of in this season is that I don't have to necessarily throw away everything. What was working and how might I adjust it or make some small tweaks, right? So now I am in the car a lot more. So instead of being able to write back to people or write back to emails, I'm finding that I'm dictating a lot more in the car.
Mhm.
So it's starting to make these tweaks, but, no one likes, new things because you often feel like you suck at them. So I look at some of the voice texts that I'm sending to people and I'm like, oh, I should never have said that. This is actually quite embarrassing. Or I like to put punctuation and this is not putting punctuation. And so it is also learning that when you're starting something new, it's going to look really different.
Right. Yeah. And I think that it's also, I love what you said about you don't have to do it all at once. It's not like you need to throw everything out and then start over, but also that if you approach it kind of experimentally, if you can approach it like with iteration, iteratively, yeah, that's the word I was going for. If you can approach it that way, then there's also less pressure because you're not saying like this first iteration of my new system needs to be the thing that's going to last me through the next season. You can say instead, like, I'm going to try this. And like, you're trying dictating and it's kind of working. It's like better than not being able to send those texts and emails, probably. But you still maybe need to learn how to say period and comma and like whatever, right? Which is weird.
Which is very weird. But I think that that's right, is we often think we have to have this big, huge amount of time to set up a new system. And if you can approach it with this idea of, I am going to do this and it's going to be imperfect at first, right? Rather than I am not going to act at all because I want it to be perfect and I need to, have a whole huge slot of time. There are no whole huge slots of time on my calendar anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. So I have to figure out, how do I do something in small enough chunks that feels like I'm making progress, but it can feel really frustrating because I know that I want to do more. And so I have to really say, this is good enough for right now. I'm going to get better over time. But if you get a bad text from me and you're like, what the heck is she saying? Now you know why.
Now we know you're just dictating and it's fine. Um, yeah, I mean, it's honestly, it probably has more punctuation than any of the texts that come from my teenagers. So,
That's probably true.
right?
Although I'm not sure I aspire to the level of grammar of my teenagers at
This
this
is
point.
this is also true. But I think you're really right. Like I think what you said about not having large chunks of time is true, probably not just for you and for me, but for literally everyone, right? And it makes it really hard to kind of imagine these big projects or these big shifts or these big changes in any way other than iteratively or little bite-sized pieces because, it's not going to happen all at once. It always makes me think of, sometimes I'm like sharing with clients different tools I use or like doing a demo of something and like I use text expander as a text expander, right? So I have shortcuts for all these like snippets and emails and things like this. And I'll show people this and I'll have to be like, okay, caveat here. I did not create this all at once, right? Like
Yeah.
there are thousands of things in here. Like there are probably thousands of snippets in there, or maybe a few hundred. I don't know. But like I just built them one at a time as I was like going back in my email to be like, wait, how did I phrase that the last time I sent it to somebody? Um, but it looks like, oh my God, how would I ever have time to like put together this massive thing? And the answer is you don't and you won't. You have to do it a little bit at a time.
Yeah, you really have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to need to stop in the middle of things. And I think most people have been trained to say, I'm going to finish when it's done. And for big projects like these, whether it's setting up new systems, setting up templates for text expander, you feel like I just want to spend one day on it and have it all be ready and have it all be finished so that I can walk away, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we were kids, like you didn't get to go out to play until your homework was done. And I feel like as an adult, your homework is never really done.
Never.
Kind of like my laundry. But I do feel like we often say like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do it, it's going to be finished, never to be touched again. And I think that's something that we all need to learn about our systems is that we do have to keep coming back to them. We need to adjust them as seasons shift and change. And we have to make space for that. I think that that's something I knew inherently in this season, but I probably haven't made the space as intentionally as I might have before.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I want to double click on what you just said about like finishing when you're done, because the done word is so loaded because it's not that like the way that I think about this is you have to decide what time done is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then stop, right? Like stop for now, not forever, but for now, because you won't actually reach, like, just like your laundry will never reach this stasis of like, it's all clean and I'm not going to need to clean underwear again because they're just endless or whatever. Or the dishes, right? We don't have endless dishes. They will always be there. Emails will always come in. That's why there's no such thing as inbox zero. There's only inbox zero-ish, right? Because there will always be like another email that comes in the second you get it to zero, right? And so I think this is just a really important concept because like as you and I both know and have talked about in the past, like we would never do anything fun and enjoy our lives if we were waiting for the work to be done because you and me and everyone else could work 18 hours a day, sleep 6 hours a day, and there would still be more work every single day forever.
I really feel like this is an important point. Early in my career, I would stay at work super late into the night, right? Okay, I need to get everything done that was on my to-do list, even just for that day.
Hmm.
And then I would find myself maybe working until 10 o'clock. And there came a moment where I was like, this is actually counterproductive. I am finding that my brain is not fresh. I need to actually think a little bit more about my own rest because when I'm well rested, the ideas flow a lot more freely, right? When do you have your best ideas? When you go to the bathroom, when you're in the shower. And for me, I started to put some rules in place around done. One was just like, I am not going to work past a certain time at night.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, that was 10 p.m. Now it's about 8 p.m. because I need sleep. I think the other thing just around done is I would not say the whole project needs to be quote unquote done. I would break the project down into smaller tasks. So if I was writing, let's say, a grant report to a funder, all right,
Mm.
today I'm going to write the introduction, and done is when the introduction, is written down on paper. And tomorrow done will be when I write, the first section of the report. And then the next day, maybe it's looking at the budget. So can you break things down into much smaller chunks? And it tricks your mind. It's like a little Jedi trick of the mind to say, yes, I'm done, but maybe I'm not done with the entire thing, right? It really is breaking down a project into much smaller pieces.
Right. Which makes it infinitely more manageable, right?
Yeah, and more
Because
gratifying.
yeah, more gratifying. You get
like now finish 3 or 4 projects instead of just one huge one.
right. You get little dopamine hits every time you go through, you finish a step. And the reality is, like, just like you said before, none of us have these huge swaths of time on our calendar to be able to, get a whole thing done and, just have all the time in the world. Like, that's just not how most people's jobs, lives, works are. And so it can feel like, I think you probably have this too. A lot of people are like, I have all of these projects that I want to do outside of work or things that I want, whatever. And I just never find time for them. And like the reality is we'll never find time. You have to make the time. But also, if you're thinking that like you're going to do this big project all on one day, you're never going to find that day. That day will never, ever, ever show up. But if you can break it down, you can get it done. Like you can move it along.
I will say I have broken down things into a small of a bite size as just open a document.
Yes.
Just open the document.
Yes.
And I feel like that seems insignificant, but sometimes just the hurdle of like finding where the document is or just creating a new space for it is a real challenge. And then once you get over that hurdle, you're like, okay, now I can do the next step of this. So that to me feels like a space and a place where if we can just say to folks like, how can you break this down into the smallest component part, even so that it feels so easy, right? Whether it's exercise, okay, you want to start exercising. Could you do 1 push-up today?
Right.
Could you go for 1 walk around the block? Because I think we have this sense of like, we can do everything.
Right.
And we expect to be really good and excellent at it at the start. And I think we need to be able to say, you know what, in the beginning, just starting is enough. Just showing up is enough. Just opening up the tab or the new document is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And like I often say, make that first step so easy, you can't actually convince yourself not to do it. Right. And like, it's really hard to convince yourself that you don't have the energy, the mental space, et cetera, to open a document. Right. It's hard. It's hard to convince yourself of that, right?
No, like, okay, then you need to say like, what else is behind this that I might not want to do this for? Like, then it starts to get in some mindset questions. But if I can break it down into just that smallest component part, it really does make a huge difference.
Right. And and often it's like the very first step I find needs to be the smallest, because just getting started with the first step, you will get more done than you thought you would, or, that you imagined, right? But it's often just that like task initiation hurdle, right? That like, okay, I've just got to get it going. I have to write the first word on the page. I have to like have the idea. I have to whatever. I think that part is often the hardest.
Yeah, I think what can really be a challenge too is that sometimes people just don't even know where to start, right? There's this big task ahead of them, and there are so many different paths that they can take. And so just being able to say, I'm going to start somewhere.
Yeah.
There is no right answer. I'm just going to start somewhere feels like a big cognitive lift for people. So I'll often just say to folks, like, there isn't a right answer. And I think people will often ask me, just tell me the plan. Tell me how to start a business. Like, I mean, okay, that's a big question.
Yeah.
But like, they're looking for the roadmap. And I want to tell people, right? Like, you need to know the direction that you're going. And sometimes the details don't matter as much, right? Like, the details will all start to come together, but just start somewhere. Just put a stake in the ground. What feels easiest to you? What are you most excited to start with? So that's something that I often will tell people as well.
Well, I think that makes a ton of sense, right? Because it's like if you're stuck in analysis paralysis, which is really what that is, then it actually doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter which thing that you start with is. If you're sitting there and, and you're like, I have all of these high priority things to do and I don't know which to do first. Well, the answer is it doesn't actually matter which one you do first because they're all the same priority, right? And so you can do any of them and just get it started. And that will be better than, continuing to kind of sit there in paralysis around
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I always say imperfect action is better than perfect inaction.
Totally.
And I think that's hard when you have been a perfectionist for a large portion of your life, when you're like, I want to get it right. I want to get it right on the first try. And I see this like with one of my kids in particular. She really wants to get it right on the first try. And I'm like, you just need to put something down on paper first, right? If she's writing, you need to put something down on paper. And then once you have it, then we can start to perfect it. But until you put something down, it's going to be really hard because otherwise it's just swimming in your head.
Totally. Yes. And it is so much harder to manage the swirl than it is to even just get it out. And one thing I often find is that, like, when I'm helping clients to break down their tasks or to figure out how to put things in a plan that works for them, one thing that I'll often do is just have them start brainstorming, like, what are all the things that need to be done to get this thing done? And then you can kind of drag them into the right order. And then without a doubt, they'll be the first thing at the top. This is the first thing I need to do. And I'll say, does anything need to happen before that first thing happens? And usually there's like 3 or 4 other things that come to mind. They're like, oh, right. Like, before I do this, I actually have to, write this thing, or I have to go like check with Susie about it, or I have to whatever. But if it's all living up in your head, it's actually really, really hard to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see people struggle when they're trying to hold it all in their head and they don't necessarily have either a system to get it out, or a structured way of thinking about how to make something happen. Another problem I find people struggle with more than anything, is sometimes they don't even know the direction that they're going. Right? They're like, I want to spend my time well. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? Right? And so you have to almost start to step back and say, what are the things that matter most to me so that I can spend my time on those things? But sometimes when we talk about productivity, I want to be productive. Okay, well, what do you want to be productive about?
Right.
That feels like a big piece of knowledge that's missing for folks sometimes. I'm like, you need to kind of know where you need to point your car to get there.
Yeah. And sometimes that's like the piece that it's like, we got to tease that out, right? Because it's not always super evident. And then it's hard. It's like, I find that often, it's easier to start from a position of, or more realistic maybe, to start from a position of like, let's track your time for a week or so. And then let's see, what are your reactions to what you found, right? Because sometimes it's a lot harder to be like, well, here's how I want to spend my time, and I want to be doing this, and I want to be doing that. But if we look and we say, hey, what really surprised you about how you are spending your time right now, right? Or like, if you're looking at this, what did you spend like way less time on than you would like in your ideal world? Or what are you spending like way so much time on that you're just like shocked you're spending that much time on it? Like, sometimes it's easier to react to data than to like come up with it all on your own. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is easy to sort of look back and say, even at your calendar for the last few weeks, and say, how am I spending my time? If someone looked at this, what would they think my priorities were, right? And am I comfortable with that as my priorities? And sometimes, listen, I am spending a lot more time in the car with my kids. And the question is, okay, how can I make that meaningful? Because for me, something that feels important and non-negotiable is I want to make fun family memories. So how do I use the time that I have, even if it's sort of not able to be adjusted in a way that makes most sense to me? So I love this idea of tracking your time, seeing where it's going. And then, I am a realist and we live in the real world. Like, there are some things that are just not going to change. I would love to be able to spend all day reading books. I would love it. It would be the most amazing thing ever. And like, it's just not the way my life is set up right now. So I think, being able to see, where are you spending your time? What can you potentially get rid of that doesn't actually make all that much sense? And then for the things that really aren't movable right now, or that you can't adjust, maybe you can't get a carpool with somebody else, then how can we use that in a way that is smarter, right? So whether it's hanging out with my kids, listening to a podcast, singing along with them, making fun family memories, um, I'm trying to both get rid of the things that don't matter on my calendar and use the time that I have much more intentionally and wisely.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because you're right. Like there are things that we just can't. We can't do anything about for this season of life. They just are what they are. Like it's kind of like, I am a real night person, but my kids went to school and they had to get there early in the morning, much early. And like, unfortunately, that was just my life for many, many years until they could get themselves to school, was that like I had to get up hours earlier than my body would like to because like they had to go to school. That was just it,
Yeah.
right? And there are things like that in life. But, you better believe as soon as they were able to take public transit, well, now they're getting themselves to school and I'm sleeping in later. But you mentioned a word there, non-negotiables. And we were talking about kind of like the non-negotiables that maybe we don't have control over on our schedules. But what to you are like some non-negotiables in your week that protect your time, that protect your energy? What are those like standard practice? Like what are the things that you do that you're like, without this, everything would go to hell, you know?
Yeah. So there are probably two big ones that I can think of. So every morning I wake up and move my body. Um, it doesn't matter what that looks like. I just say I have to do 20 minutes of something, whether it's gentle yoga, walking around the block, a strength class. And then sometimes I'll actually do, work beyond that. But every day, I just feel like it is important to me to keep my mind and my body healthy. And getting up and moving my body feels like it releases tension. It sets me up for the day. It provides me energy. So that is one non-negotiable for me. Um, on a weekly basis, I am a weekly planner. So every week on Friday, I sit down, look at my calendar from the week before, kind of just give myself a sense of how did it go, what might still need to happen in the next week. And then I'll also look at the next week and say, what is my key priority for next week? We are heading into the holidays, so my weeks are looking different and I need to adjust to that. But for me, weekly planning is a non-negotiable. If I don't sit down and do that, it feels like I am playing whack-a-mole all throughout the week. Like I'm just not prepared for what's coming up. So that's something that feels really important. Now, I will say in this season, my husband and I also, once I've done weekly planning, we weekly plan together to see what's coming up in the next week. And because he is often traveling to Boston with our oldest for hockey, our Friday weekly plannings have fallen off the radar a little bit. And when we don't do them, we feel it. So if he comes back on Sunday night, we're like, okay, how can we do this as quick and as fast as possible to understand who's doing the driving this week? What are we having for dinner? Where are the hot spots? How are we making sure that we're planning for, whatever else is coming up? But in this season of life, that weekly planning with my partner has gotten a little less consistent. And I can tell when we don't do it. Like I feel a little more like, ooh, what's happening this week? So the non-negotiables for me really are to just moving my body and the weekly planning.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is, I'm flexible around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to know the things that we can't, that like really move the needle and that we don't want to let go of. And the things that like, that we got to be flexible in life, right? But I agree with you. Like weekly planning is an absolute non-negotiable for me. I feel I can't enjoy my weekend without it. It's like really hard for me to enjoy the weekend if I don't know that like everything on my task list has a next action date of Monday or the future. Like if there's anything hanging out there, it's really hard. And then like coming into the week, yeah, I like want to know what are my big plans now. Will it change? 100%. Like every single, like there's no day that goes off without a hitch. Like every single day is different. But I think that like coming into the week, knowing that like, here's what my intentions are for this week. Here's what like the primary goals are so that other things can be pushed if need be, right? Like what is the real stuff that has to be done?
Yeah.
I think that's important. And that also, I mean, it doesn't make me feel happy for you, but it makes me feel a little bit better about myself thinking about the fact that, we also used to have a weekly family meeting from the time that the kids were like 2 and 4. We've been having a weekly family meeting like on the weekends. And when, as you know, one of my kids went off to school, and is not living with us during the week. And our like family meeting has just like really, it's gone from like a 95% hit rate to like a 20% hit rate in the last 2 months. And yeah, that's just a thing that we've been thinking about too. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's not as necessary anymore, given that, the kids have their own schedules and get themselves to places. And like, it used to be that we did that because, well, one, it's just good to know what's going on, but also so that, your 5-year-old knows that there's a dentist appointment coming up on Thursday and is not freaking out about it the moment that you're like, hey, right, we have a dentist appointment today.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's really something about new seasons and just saying first and foremost, like, do we still need the thing that we were doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is this something that we still need to do? I will say the calendar, and we use a shared Google Calendar where each person has their own color code on our calendar so you can see who's where at what time.
Yep.
And I will say like that has really helped us just with our kids to feel like they know what's happening and I don't have to nag them. So actually the other day, my middle was like, hey, I see I have an orthodontist appointment next week. I should make sure that I get these things out. And I was like, that's a great idea. So I think there is something to setting up systems that allow you to give your kids more responsibility as well, right? So like you can shift them into their independence season, if you will.
Yeah.
But listen, none of like you and I do this in a lot of ways for a living. And we can show people like we don't have to be perfect. Things shift and change. And I will say though, to your point, I have to do weekly planning on a Friday because I could never relax on the weekend if I was thinking about like, what are all of my to-dos for Monday?
Yeah.
There's one other thing that is a non-negotiable for me that didn't actually come up that now as I think about it, helps me with my weekly planning. Every day at about 4 p.m. my time, I have an alarm set that says COB top 3. And that's close of business top 3. What are the 3 things I want to make sure I do tomorrow? So that when I open up my computer on the next day or Monday morning after the weekend, I don't have to think, what was it that I was doing yesterday? What were the things that were on my mind? I at least have a clear sense of what's going to happen. Now, do I always get through those 3 things? Because sometimes, things blow up in your inbox overnight and you go, okay, I have to readjust, but at least I have a plan. So that feels really important to me.
I feel I do a very similar thing. I think, we have similar like directions of how we do things, but different ways about doing them. And so I just call that daily planning. And it's just a kind of, to me, it's a sanity check on my weekly plan. So I'm just basically saying, like, is there anything that I didn't get done today that needs to be shifted to sometime in the future? Because, there often is, right? Like I maybe was overly ambitious or whatever. There's a couple of things that didn't quite even though I tried to put enough buffer in my schedule, there's a thing or two that needs to move. And then so that when I come in the next day, so that I can enjoy my evening, right? So that I can not think about that because I know that when I get back to my computer the next day, I know exactly what I'm planning to do and then can adjust based on that plan, right? Which will need to happen. But yeah, it's like it frees up your mind to be able to be present with whatever it is you're doing outside of work in the evenings, whether that's with your kids or, even if you're listening and you don't have kids and don't want kids, like you also have many things that you're doing in your evenings, I am sure, that are very fulfilling and maybe even more aligned with your own interests or whatever, right?
Yeah, it really helps me shut off the other side of my brain that's like constantly thinking about work. I think like there is, whenever I talk with clients, they're like, I want to be more present. And I think part of the challenge with being present is like you're carrying so much in your head. So you're like, I don't want to forget this. Oh, what was it that you said? And so you need these external ways in which to take all of the things that, you're juggling in a very complex life and say, okay, I can put this over here and I have trust that I can come back to it, but I don't need to remember it all of the time.
Yeah, totally. And it's so funny. My very first blog post in like 2018 was called "Remember" is a four-letter word.
It is. It is.
Right?
I agree. I
And
agree.
it's because like, yeah, I think maybe I just have always had a really crappy memory. Like maybe it's the ADHD working memory stuff. Maybe I just was not blessed with a good memory or whatever. But I think that like part of the reason that I have built these systems and things that I use and that I teach other people in my own life is because like I've never had that capacity to remember. So if I try to remember, it always feels like that's the all-encompassing thing. Like if I have one of those great shower thoughts, I literally am either repeating it to myself over and over and over in the shower until the shower is done, or I'm like, let the gods take it. It's not coming back to me, or maybe it is, right? It's just like I either have to like release it or like just repeat it to myself, and that's the only thing that I can do until I get out of the shower. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like we might have been separated at birth, honestly, because I am often in the shower going, what if I got a whiteboard in here so I could
Or
jot down, I know,
shower whiteboards.
shower whiteboards. And I keep thinking, and then I'm like, okay, if I can remember it after the shower, then that means that I was really meant. Because, I am an ideas person. I like to generate lots of ideas. And not all of them need to see the light of day, to be perfectly honest. And so I think there is also this piece where like, I need to trust that the things that really need to happen will happen
Mhm.
as well. And, I think you said this earlier, there was a moment when I was weekly planning, I used to write it, right? But
Mm.
before we like really went super digital, but I used to write things. And the act of writing something from week to week
Mhm.
would make me realize I haven't done this and I've written this for 6 weeks in a
Right.
row now. Do I really want to do this?
Right.
Right. So I think sometimes you can also just let time
Mm.
make a decision for you if it feels important, but you're not really getting around to it. It's like, let's reassess. Is this really important?
Yeah.
I have given it over and I have decided it is no longer important.
Totally. Like I think that this is so, I use a digital tool, TickTick, for my tasks, right? But like I find that if I have to have a personal rule that if I have like just pushed something that's like I've pushed it 5 or 6 times, that seems to be about the right amount, then I'm like, this is just a someday maybe item. This is not getting a date anymore because clearly I don't care about it enough. Like
Hmm.
maybe it is a really great idea, but like you, I generate lots of what I think are good ideas. And like I can't act on them all. And so maybe it was important when I put it in here and I was really excited about it. But in the context of everything else that's going on, it's just not as important. And so it needs to be shuttered to a different place where maybe I'll come back to it one day, but probably not.
Yeah, I mean, like it's okay to say like we can push this into a undefined point in the future. And if it becomes important again, at least I have, knowledge of what I might want to do. Right. Like I have many a document that's like, these half-baked ideas.
Right.
Um, and sometimes I come back to them, I'm like, that was a really good idea. I should go back to that. And then I do. And
Mhm.
other times I'm just like, no, that should have died.
Right.
So
Right. Or sometimes I look through and I'm like, oh, I actually did that thing just on a whim or whatever.
yes, yes. Or
And I'm
I
like,
did it in a different way.
yeah, yeah, I did some that came up in another way. Um, yeah, I think there's so many things like that. And the ability to just like recognize that we're not going to do it all. Like we're not going to do it all. Even all of our great ideas are not going to come to fruition. And that is okay because we're properly prioritizing things, right? We're saying like what is actually important now in this moment. Um,
Absolutely.
all right. Well, I know we could talk all day, and sometimes we do, but I would love two things. One, if you want the listeners to take away one thing from today's episode, leave them with one thought, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is just remember what season you're in and know that you can adjust. What used to work for you in the past may not work for you anymore, and that's okay.
Right.
You can adjust with small steps. You don't have to throw out everything. But I think we often shift through these seasons and feel badly that, what was working isn't anymore. it's okay to accept the reality that you're in. And I am going to take that advice myself as well. So just remember, whatever season you're in is okay. There's no judgment on that. And sometimes we need to shift around our systems and even how we define productivity and how productive we are. I can tell you when my kids were little, there was a very different version of productivity. I was like, yes, I showered today. This is amazing. I feel accomplished. Now
Yep.
it looks a little bit different. So just think about what's the season I'm in and what's really realistic for that and what systems might need to support that and how might I need to change what's really been working for me in the past, but that's no longer working or I've outgrown.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe a good tool for people that I think you and I probably use is keep start stop model. Or
Yes.
as I learned recently, there's a much better alliterative way of saying this, which I like better, which is pause, persist, pivot.
Oh, I like that.
Right?
Pause, persist, pivot. I've often
Yeah.
heard of it as stop, start, continue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's a really helpful tool, which I have also written something about many, many moons ago, probably one of my first blogs as well. Um, is, you know, sometimes we need to get rid of some of the old things that were no longer working for us. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the hardest part.
Right.
Everyone's willing to start
Yeah.
and even continue, but the stopping or
It's
the
hard.
pausing
Mm-hmm.
um, can feel like a challenge. So I encourage everyone, think about what can you stop?
Yes. Humans and loss aversion, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then final question is where can people find out more about you and follow your work?
The best place, honestly, to follow me is on LinkedIn. I am the most prolific there. I write a lot about leadership, sustainable systems, and particularly how mission-driven leaders can stop burning out. So follow me on LinkedIn at Danielle Pickens. I would love to see you there.
Awesome. And I will drop a link to your LinkedIn in the chat, or not in the chat, but in the show notes so that people can find you easily. But thank you so much for being on the show. This was a really fun conversation, and I am sure that our listeners will get a lot out of it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alexis.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Do More, Stress Less podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, make sure to subscribe now so that you can save yourself time in the future and never miss an episode. It'll take 5 seconds to hit subscribe, and the payoff will be big. You'll never have to think about it again. And pro tip, you'll be using the decide once strategy and saving yourself from the fate of decision fatigue. Do yourself this quick kindness, and I'll see you next time.